Hello and welcome to the MHR podcast. I'm Andy.
I'm Alice.
Alice, it's been an exciting week. We've had a new election and a new government.
Indeed.
So there's a lot to consider, which is why we've got our friend James Manning back, our legislation expert here at MHR. Thanks for joining us, James.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We thought it's probably worth touching base and making sure we understand what's going on with the world and what it means for businesses. So with a new government, with a lot of promises, obviously there's a new cabinet. They've obviously come in with what they want to be doing, and there's a lot of noise around that. It's going to raise a lot of questions, isn't it, for organisations? So what does that mean for them? What's the impact? So, I mean, before we dive into the details, do you want to give us any of your immediate thoughts on everything that's happened the last week?
Yeah, so at this stage, all we've really got to go on is the manifesto pledges, which, a political party's manifesto is, sometimes only worth the paper it's written on. So we'll have to see how things turn out. So anything we say here is kind of speculation at this point, whether or not it will happen or happen in exactly the way they say. But high level, we don't know an awful lot about their tax policies, so how they're going to fund the pledges. But probably the biggest thing that will be of impact to businesses is there's a lot of proposals for worker rights, which is obviously good for workers, but could end up being expensive for business.
Yeah. So what do you think then, so from what's been said so far, so let's ignore manifestos because like you say, proof's in the pudding, right, later down the line. But obviously a few statements have been made about, say, like the housing market, all of these other things. What do you think is on, if you're a HR manager, or you're a payroll manager, or you're looking at systems, or you're like, oh, this is going to affect how my business runs, whatever sector I am, what do you think are the key points that people are going to start asking questions about now?
Well, again, there's going to be two elements from purely the people side of things. As I've said, there's a lot of proposals for tightening up on workers' rights, things around minimum wage, sick pay. They're floating a right to disconnect in a similar way to systems introduced in Belgium and Ireland. So potentially for HR managers, there's going to be a lot of work to do around looking at company policies, potentially employment contracts, if those changes come about, making sure those things align with their practice. From kind of a more financial point of view of business, Labour are talking about providing more certainty to businesses. So they've pledged to cap corporation tax at the current 25% and try and provide a certainty around taxation and legislation for business planning so that businesses can look at a more long-term investment and strategy. But again, only time will tell there.
Yeah, definitely. And we speak about HR managers and we're a software company. So I wondered, how has it kind of questioned where your work might be heading for the next 6 months?
We tend to try not to plan too much until we've got a bit more certainty about what is coming down the line. Okay. A lot of the proposals are kind of things that already exist. So, for example, with sick pay, they're proposing getting rid of the lower earnings limit, which would open that up to everybody. So as far as kind of a payroll system concerned, that's a tweak to figures. It's not kind of a massive new policy that's going to need a lot of work around. That is more about this is going to be a cost to businesses as people that currently aren't entitled to sick pay will be. Okay. If we're talking more about things like flexible working, then for HR systems and things like that, there's going to be concerns around how you plan that, how you fit that around your workforce. So long and short of it is, we'll probably need to give it a few months before we really start making decisions about what we do. But for people in my position and in HR departments and to some degree payroll departments is going to be a lot of keeping an eye on the news and how things develop, because Labour have pledged to, within the first 100 days, kind of investigate and do the fact finding around these policies and whether the economy's in a state to do these things. But even when we get to that point, there's going to be a process of getting legislation through Parliament. Now, they've got a big majority, so that shouldn't be a problem, but it is still going to take time.
Okay, interesting. And when you're speaking about kind of, it seems like changes, they're not going to happen overnight. And you spoke about that first 100 days. Are we expecting them to, I don't know, when that key information is going to be coming, how long does it normally take to start kind of trickling through into when HR managers will know a bit more definitely then?
So there's going to be a lot coming along in the short term, though, to actually make any firm decisions. I think we're definitely going to be probably into the last quarter of the year before we get too much that we can do firm planning around.
Right.
We'd probably be expecting a budget at some point soon then.
Yes, so Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, have said that they won't do the first budget until they've had a report from the Office of Budget Responsibility, the OBR. So probably the earliest we could expect that would be the back half of September, but my bet would be it would be a bit earlier than we usually expect the autumn budget.
So on a similar vein then, obviously, like you say, it's all speculation, and what we're saying is time is a great healer here on giving people a bit more confidence in the decisions they might want to be making or what risks there are. So in a different angle of looking at it, apart from what the government's saying, which we can't really lock down or commit to right now, what do you think are the biggest threats in the back of business' head? What do you think people are worrying about the most?
I think my view probably would be the costs of some of the measures. It's a very pro-worker in terms of the manifesto pledges, their make work pay plan. So it's what they pitch as ending kind of one-sided flexibility. So things like 0-hour contracts, the ability to dismiss workers with little or no reason in the early days of employment until they reach that 2-year mark. So they want to introduce a lot of rights from day one. Now with proper kind of induction policies and things like that, that shouldn't be, businesses will be working in that way in a lot of cases anyway, so it shouldn't be massive changes. But things like the plans for minimum wage, recent increases have put a lot of pressure on businesses as is, and Labour are looking for minimum wage to take account a lot more of cost of living and things like that, as well as abolishing age-related bandings on minimum wage as well, which could be a huge cost. So I think it's going to be financial primarily that's going to be the concern around some of these enhanced rights for workers.
But it sounds like, from what you're saying as well, like if it looks like there seems to be a bit more of a lens on kind of the people element of work and the kind of the welfare element of work and the kind of employee protection side there. But again, like you said, that comes at a cost. So there's kind of swings and roundabouts there, because you actually think probably from a public sector point of view, there's going to be a lot more assurances there for employees, but also that's where money often gets tight in a public sector. So it's about, I suppose, affirming that if changes are coming, the pressure might be more in a public sense, because it's getting more from restricted budgets or budgets that may have to spend a bit more to get what they need. Would you say that's a fair reflection?
Yes, it's true. But the other thing to consider is with better employee working conditions, there's probably likely to be better retention of staff as well. And recruitment is very expensive, so if a business can reduce turnover of staff, they can save money there as well. So it's probably a more forward-thinking way of looking at it, in putting money into retaining your staff rather than replacing people who've left because they're not happy with conditions.
Yeah, it's an interesting point actually, because I mean, how many times, Andy, have we spoke about retention in the workplace and the cost of recruitment? So I think that change of government, it'll be interesting to see maybe, this time next year, what actually has happened in the marketplace and how businesses have reacted to it. I think it's very hard to probably be proactive at this point when you say that it's all on paper at the moment, but it comes down to what the action in the next kind of 6 months. But definitely for businesses, it must be a worry, I think, to know that costs might increase for them. But then ultimately, maybe the long-term goal is that they have better retention, or, employees actually look more at a longer term with the business. So it's some really interesting thoughts. Thank you ever so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's really good. I completely agree. I didn't think that this would end up being a conversation that led to kind of a retention point. But like you say, it's a big money saver if you can get it right. And actually, if this is where, I think it's a really, really good observation we made there. So thank you, James, for your input. Really appreciate. I'm sure we'll be dragging you back in soon when we hear about when the budget's coming out.
Yeah, I'll be back for the budget.
Lovely. And that's a really good prompt as well. If you don't follow us already, make sure you do subscribe to the MHR podcast, because we will make sure that we publish a budget report and a review from us and our team and our experts here the day that comes out, so you can learn from us exactly how that affects businesses and what to expect. Until then, early days. Let's wait and see what happens, and we'll give you more on when we hear it. So until then, I've been Andy.
And I'm Alice.
Thanks, James.
Thank you,
See you
James.
next week.
Bye.